Good way.
Thank you, Evan. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you're energized and ready for another 40 minutes at the end of the day. Woo. So we're going to take you through the planning, execution, and our lessons from our migration from APIM to Kong. So my name is Claus. I'm a platform developer, platform engineer at Vipps MobilePay.
Yes, my name is Kaja. I work as a senior platform engineer and product manager at Vipps MobilePay. We're working there for about 4 years now. And yes, I said Vipps MobilePay. If you're Norwegian or you live in Norway, you've probably heard of or know about Vipps, which is our brand name in Norway and Sweden. And then we have the MobilePay app in Denmark and Finland. So we were previously 2 separate companies, but we merged about 3 years ago. In October of 22, EU approved the merger. In this merger, it was chosen that we would use the Vipps tech platform. So we merged, or we moved everything from the old MobilePay platform over to the Vipps platform. And at the beginning of 2024, we launched a new app in Denmark and in Finland. And then the rest of 24 and 25, we used to create a Nordic payment solution. So you can now send money across the borders and pay across the borders. And the reason why I wanted to mention this is to show that we've had a huge user growth over the last couple of years. So just from December of 23 until March of 24, we almost tripled the number of users. So the platform that we work with needs to be very scalable. Status today is we have more than 12 million users. We have just over 400,000 merchants, so you can pay online or in-store. And last year, we had a total of 1.2 billion transactions running through our platform. We have offices in 3 different countries, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. And we are just over 600 employees with about 40 tech teams. As for the team Claus and I work in, we are 12 people located in Oslo and Aarhus in Denmark. And we are just one platform team in the company. A little bit about how we're organized. So we are a development platform team in the area with 2 other security teams. And then for the operations part, this is a bit special about our company is that as the platform team, we don't have the on-call or the 24/7 support. We have that with the command center that's organized on the side of us. So we need to ensure that everything that we develop on our platform or provide, they need to have 24/7 charge. And for this talk, it's very important to understand the culture in Vipps MobilePay. So we have these 3 values that we live by. It's not just a slide that we bring up on the kickoff every year. These are actually very much part of our daily vocabulary and the ways of work. So we have the no worries, which is that we dare to fail, we fail fast, and we share our fuck-ups. We have a dedicated Slack channel where we share fuck-ups. We say no worries, we all learn from it, and we move on. We all work together as one team. So we work together towards the same goal, and we are curious about each other. And then lastly, we have keep it simple, which is essentially why Vipps was created in the first place, was to make payments easier. So we try to live by that in everything that we do. So we do have a very trust-based setup and culture in Vipps, which is very important to understand for the rest of the migration that we're going to talk about. So now over to the more fun stuff, the tech part, which you're all here to hear about. But before I tell you about the Vipps MobilePay tech stack, I wanted to hear about your guys' API gateway. So by the raise of hand, how many here work in a company that has an API gateway at all? Quite a few. And if you keep your hand up, how many requests do you handle? Do you handle more than 1 million requests per month? Yeah, still quite a few. What about 10 million? Not so many anymore. 1 billion? No? Yeah. So at Vipps MobilePay, we have 13 billion API requests per month. So needless to say that switching out our API gateway was quite a huge task to take on. Our tech stacks looks a bit like this. I'm not going to go into detail, but the essential part here is that we are cloud native, hence why we're here talking today. We have everything in Azure. And for our team specifically, this is the main stuff that we work with. So we have our main runtime platform, which we call VCE, Vipps Core Engine, which is Kubernetes and APIM and Kong. And on top of Kubernetes, we have our own operator. We have Backstage as our developer portal, where we have the paved roads for our developers. As a development platform, we have a combination of GitHub and Azure DevOps. Hopefully soon just GitHub, but of course we have some legacy stuff. Metrics and logging, we have mainly Grafana and Splunk. And then for the developer experience, like I mentioned, we have paved roads and we have self-service for our developers, mainly through Backstage. So we have a very decentralized setup where we as the platform team provide the infrastructure, and then the developers themselves own their APIs and their applications, and they deploy it themselves. We're not gatekeepers. We're not bottlenecks through this. Yeah. So why did we move from APIM to Kong? This is the typical requests per second on our platform throughout the day. So you can see during nighttime, it's fairly low with 500 requests per second. And then throughout the morning and until lunchtime at 11:30, slowly increases to the peak of about 8,000 requests per second. So it fluctuates quite a lot throughout the day. So this requires a platform that can scale. In addition to the daily fluctuation, we have a few events throughout the year that are very important for us. So we have the TV-aksjonen, which is a yearly fundraiser in Norway with a TV show during the evening. For us, it's essentially DDoS put into system, because they have what they refer to as Vipps stunt, where they put the Vipps number on the screen, and they say, okay, everyone, let's gather as much money as possible within the next minute. Very funny. So this year, last Sunday, we saw a peak of 15,000 requests per second when they did this. So this is quite a lot more than our typical daily peak. And in general, we saw almost close to 10,000 requests per second throughout the TV show that whole entire evening. We have 17th of May, our national holiday. If you're Norwegian, you probably used Vipps to buy your hot dogs or ice cream this day. It's very important for our brand reputation that we have operational stability and that it works when you are in that payment situation. Black Friday, or Black Week, or Black Month, or whatever it is now. Not very high peak load, but in general, very high volume. And it's important that we operate this day. And especially this year when we have tap to pay now as well in store, not just online. And then lastly, Christmas Eve. If you buy wrapping paper and you schedule your gift, you most likely do it at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., just like everyone else. So you can imagine that full hour, there's always a huge queue of gifts being sent. No one schedules it at like 18, 17, right? Yes. So all of these events and also the daily loads, it requires a lot of scaling. APIM takes 45 minutes to scale. We don't have time for that. We can easily prepare for those things we know, like the daily fluctuation, which is pretty obvious, and also the events that we're prepared for. But in case of incidents, we don't have 45 minutes. And also, in cases of incidents, imagine you're at the train station trying to buy your train ticket. There's an incident, it doesn't work, you keep on retrying, right? So that just everyone keeps knocking on our door, increasing the queues and then the latency, and yeah, shit hits the fan. One thing is that it takes 45 minutes to scale, but as soon as you start the scaling operations in APIM, it locks all other operations. So it actually happened once during an incident that we started scaling, and we started scaling in the wrong region. So we had to wait for 45 minutes, twiddling our thumbs, before we could actually scale in the right region. So by the time we had finished scaling, it was an hour and a half later, and I mean, the incident is essentially over, and the users had a shitty experience. So this is not something that we could live with when we're growing our company in the Nordics. So now that you know our company, you have a little bit of context of where we come from, what our story is, how we work, and why we choose to move from APIM to Kong. Let's have a look at our actual migration journey. So we started out in January of this year, where the migration, or the decision to move to Kong, it came pretty suddenly. Kind of fell in our laps. We didn't have a lot of time to prepare. We do have a startup mentality in Vipps and a very short path to action, for better or worse. So management came to us and say, we signed with Kong, we're going to migrate, and you're going to migrate in 6 weeks. Yes, that was kind of our response as well. Part of the reason for this was that MobilePay, before the merger, had previously migrated to Kong in 6 weeks. But we were not MobilePay anymore. We were Vipps MobilePay. We're a completely different company, very different culture and setup. MobilePay didn't have a decentralized setup that we do. So we had no idea, honestly, by this time, how many APIs we had, who owned all these APIs. So how were we going to even migrate in 6 weeks? So we started out with the discovery workshop together with Kong. And we quickly realized that the license cost had already started to roll. So we were kind of paying for APIM and Kong at the same time. This is very expensive. So we needed to figure out where to start. So February came. We started looking into the details. And we pretty quickly realized that there was a pretty big difference in functionality between APIM and Kong. In APIM, we were also very highly dependent on 2 other product teams for the user and the merchant authentication. So they had functionality created in APIM that all the other product teams used. Another thing that management required was that it needed to be as little work as possible for the development teams to migrate their APIs. So with this in mind, Kong is very centralized in nature. But like I mentioned previously, we have a decentralized setup. We don't want to be the bottlenecks when the teams deploy. We have autonomous teams. We want them to be able to deploy at their own pace whenever they want and do everything themselves. But on the other hand, we need to ensure that teams can't override each other, that they can't delete each other's APIs. But then migrating as is not possible. It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole. They're 2 completely different products with very different functionality. Another thing is that we needed to do this while maintaining operational stability and without any downtime. So we needed to figure out how we could migrate 1 API at a time. We didn't want a big bang. So this was our initial traffic flow before the migration started. We had app gateway through APIM running through ingress in the cluster and to the pod. During the migration, we came up with this setup. So we had a canary proxy box in front of APIM, where we could send the traffic percentage-wise to APIM and Kong, 1 API at a time. So you could start out by sending 1% of traffic for your API to Kong and then test it out, and then 5%, 10%, 20%, etc. At the beginning, we also had a maximum of 90% traffic going to Kong. And this was so we could have a rollback in case of any incidents or any trouble. We could quickly roll back to APIM. It was very important for us as well to limit the time we had this interim setup. Because if you remember the organizational structure I mentioned earlier, we have a separate operations team that has the 24/7. And it's really a lot more complex to handle this in case of an incident. Which application are having issues, and where does the traffic actually flow? This became very complicated. And then this is the kind of goal that we're working towards. Very simple setup, keep it simple, from app gateway directly to Kong in our cluster, and then directly to the pod. So now that we have the architecture, how could we enable the teams to migrate their APIs?
Yes, thank you, Kaja. Because after all, we are the platform team, and we should enable the teams to easily do this migration. And of course, we are used to this, to simplifying the lives of the developers. After all, we have a paved road, so to say, for how the teams today do deploy their services and get most of the infrastructure. And that's something we call Vipps service. So Vipps service is essentially a CRD. I guess many people here are used to looking at CRDs, or too used to look at YAML. Yeah, we provide a CRD, which the teams then specify, and our controller takes care of creating all the infrastructure that they need. Be it your pod, your managed identity, your Grafana dashboard, and also crucially, your APIM configuration we used to have, so that the teams could specify it directly in one YAML file. But then it might come as a surprise that when we planned this migration, we did not end up baking Kong into this, actually. And there were multiple reasons for that. So one reason was actually just because our team was very resource constrained at the time. And also the timeline from management of 6 weeks made us essentially go for the easiest solution possible that we could come up with. But also a reason was that even though we are a fairly young company, just 10 years old, we still have legacy code. And unfortunately, about a third of all our services was not managed through Vipps service, and getting all of them migrated was not an option right now, unfortunately. So all our old legacy stuff was in Azure DevOps, and our new stuff in GitHub. I guess many people can relate to that. We needed to create a solution that worked for all. So we wanted to empower the teams to do this themselves. They needed to migrate their own APIs. So we ended up with a CI/CD route. We created multiple GitHub actions that the teams could implement themselves in their CI/CD pipelines. And a good thing about this was that we could create, as I said, one route for all the teams to do the migration themselves. And it was assumed that this would be less work for us as the platform team, as we were kind of resource constrained. And I guess a con was that the teams needed to write themselves the more CI/CD, but the teams were quite used to this, as we don't really own the pipelines for the development teams. So we created a build action and also a deployment action. And the reason for this split, I'll come back to, because this all comes down to how Kong wants you to do it. As Kaja said, we've hit some obstacles along the way. And essentially, to make it clear, Kong wants the development teams to go through an API platform team when deploying your APIs. So this kind of clashed with our culture for independent teams. And as they say it, only companies at the beginning of their API journey let dev teams deploy APIs themselves. Apparently, we are at the beginning of our journey then. So Kong wants you to have this platform team, and for that platform team to kind of have oversight and do a full update of all the APIs in your company, to do a complete sync when someone wants a change. But how we solved it was more in the Vipps spirit, I'd say. So we have our dev teams, regardless of whether they're legacy or up to date. And we created the actions for them to be able to build their open API spec, essentially, and also deploy them using our platform-managed workflow, which I'll get back to why we chose to do it this way. And our platform-managed workflow deploys a partial update to Kong. And the same applies to the legacy stuff in Azure DevOps. We could essentially rewrite the same stuff just using Azure pipeline templates instead of GitHub Actions. So what's the reason for this man-in-the-middle workflow managed by us? Well, it essentially comes down to control. So we are letting teams deploy their APIs without needing some central approval, but we still need to prevent accidental or even malicious overwriting or deletion of APIs. So we need some guardrails. And that comes down to us essentially implementing some access control. And in APIM, we had implemented this through our Vipps service operator. But now that we configured this straight from the GitHub Actions, we needed to implement this in another way. So we created the central workflow that I showed you. And essentially, the flow came down like this. So a repository in GitHub was defined as the owner of an API. So only like repo X could update API X. And how we did it was, the team triggers their pipeline. And GitHub Actions can create an OIDC token representing specifically that repo and that environment. And then they trigger, using the deploy action we provided, the deploy workflow. Then we validate that OIDC token to make sure that it's actually a valid GitHub-issued token. Then we fetch all the data from Kong for the control plane where all the APIs exist, because we need to make sure that what the teams will be deploying, does it overwrite something or is it brand new? So if there are no services that match what you are deploying, then of course you're able to create it. It's a new route. But if there are services found, we do the ownership check that I mentioned, and if the ownership is good, of course, you can create or update your API. And if not, then we block them, essentially. So now that we had implemented the solution, we were ready to migrate. And we had, at this time, both written the documentation. Some teams had even started out in pre-production environments. But as Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And this was our face-punching moment. So problems started to roll in when every team tried to onboard. It turns out that Kong and APIM had a lot of differences. Essentially, Kong is very strict, while APIM was kind of like, I don't care, just feed me whatever and I'll figure it out. So APIM accepts both slashes and case insensitivity and like duplicate HTTP headers. And this is not something that we knew about because, of course, we as a platform team, we don't own the APIs ourselves. So this is a classic case of Hiram's law, where consumers of our APIs, like all 13 billion requests, they have relied on weird quirks of APIM, not just our documentation, but implementation details that we didn't know about. So we ended up with pressure to more or less recreate APIM in Kong. Yeah, of course, to make the teams do as little as possible, as Kaja said. So this was actually quite easy to solve, fortunately, because we had the central workflow where we could implement the features and modify the APIs before they were shipped to Kong. And when this was done, the migrations could finally pick up speed. And after 1.5 months, we were actually 50% finished. 50% of our traffic was migrated. And summer came and summer went. And in August, we picked up our pace. And in September, we hit kind of our point of no return, where, as Kaja showed you earlier, we had this canary traffic split, and we'd at most sent 90% of the traffic per API to our Kong gateways. But now we felt that we were ready to finally do the switch and go to 100%. So every API could, if they were migrated, go fully through our Kong route. So we set a deadline then of 26th of September for every team to be complete, to be done. And by some miracle, 3 days before, we were actually done. All the teams had migrated. And 100% of our traffic went through Kong, all 13 billion requests. So then we gave them 2 more weeks to remove their APIM config before we then could finally land on our final solution where Kong also runs in our cluster, so we can scale it up as we want when we need it, and everything was nice. Yeah, so looking back at the migration in total, it spent 5 months of work for the development teams, and the first APIs were very small because we wanted to do testing with limited consequences. And then the pace picked up drastically when we hit kind of mid-May. We did some large APIs, and a lot of that was because we wanted to scale down APIM as fast as we could, and more traffic through Kong meant less traffic through APIM, so we could scale it down faster and save cost that way. And then we actually had 2 small dips here. The reason for that is that we needed to switch back to APIM for some incidents. So then we were very glad that we had the architecture we had, allowing us to, with certainty, switch back to APIM. Then a lot of teams put up great work before summer, before the summer break or summer freeze, where it essentially happened nothing. And then after some good progress, we finally hit our point of no return, where we scaled up from 90 to 100% of every API. And that brings us to today. So now we arrive here in October. We decommissioned APIM 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we deleted the resource. Yes, and that brings us to today. So what have we learned from all this, Kaja?
Yeah, so some key takeaways before we wrap it up. So like I mentioned at the beginning, we weren't really prepared for this migration. And preparation is obviously key. Knowing your current solution, how it's being used in your company, makes it a lot easier to tackle. And make sure that you take time investigating before you jump into a project of this scale. It obviously takes a lot longer than management might think. And the fact that company A was able to migrate in 6 weeks doesn't necessarily mean that company B can do the same. MobilePay and Vipps MobilePay are two very different companies with we come from very different places. So make sure you involve the right people when you set the timeline. Yeah, fitting a square peg in a round hole doesn't work. We weren't able to migrate as is, but like Claus said, we had to recreate a lot of the functionality. But then decentralizing control over a central critical component is very difficult. And then this was about the point in time where we signed up to do this talk. So we had no idea if we would stand here saying a success story or like wiping our tears.
Yeah.
But I think that creating this presentation has really made us reflect on this whole journey and our lessons and our successes. And in the end, we actually managed to do it. We all worked together in the whole company. I think there were hundreds of people involved with all the developers and everything. We all worked together as one team, truly living our values. And yeah, good documentation, clear communication, one team, and we managed to pull it off. So that was what we had. Thank you. I think we have time for some questions as well.
Great. Give them a big hand of applause. So questions?
So you, well done, by the way. You talked about the slow 45-minute wait time. So how quickly can you scale up now with Kong?
Now it takes 5 minutes, and 4 of those minutes are just warming up and starting up a new node in AKS. So Kong itself is about 1 minute, yeah.
Job.
So pretty good, yeah, comparison.
Any other questions?
Why Kong? Did you evaluate any other API gateway products?
We weren't part of that process, but I think
we can say that it was kind of colored by that MobilePay had a good experience with them in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are a financial company. We have a lot of risk and compliance and laws and registration. Yeah, we have to abide to. So the fact that MobilePay had used Kong in the past made us be able to speed up that process. So that was a lot of the reason for that decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Are you happy with Kong?
Yes.
Yeah.
It scales in 5 minutes. It's amazing.
Yeah. Any other questions?